Hey guys, so this is a demo on how to create a vector image using Adobe Illustrator. If you've never used Illustrator before or you're not very familiar with Adobe programs in general, this could feel like a lot, but if you follow each of these steps exactly, you should be able to convert a drawing or a sort of a messier image into a vector graphic that can be resized large or small without becoming pixelated. A vector graphic, in fact, is not made out of pixels. It's made out of what are called paths, which don't behave in the same way. So it's actually really nice for logos and t-shirt designs and stuff like that. So I'm just going to walk you through the process, and if you want to rewatch this demo later for the steps, please do. So the first step is if you hit F4 on your keyboard, you should have access to all of your programs, and we're going to be using Adobe Illustrator. Mine opened right up because I already had it open, but yours might need more time to start up. You're going to go to Create New. And I usually just default to using an 8.5 by 11 size canvas. You can use a different size if you have something in mind, but ultimately your actual graphic can be resized like to any scale, so it doesn't super matter to me what size this canvas is. So the next thing I'm going to do is I have my image, which in my case is a scan of a drawing that I did, and I just drop it in here. I'm going to hit Command minus in order to zoom out for a second. My drawing is much bigger than that 8.5 by 11 canvas. You can see the box here, and this is my image. So I'm just going to resize it just for the sake of having it be inside the actual space that I'm using, and then Command plus to zoom back in. So this is a pretty clean drawing. It doesn't have a lot of like scratchy pencil marks and stuff, but it could actually be cleaner and more digitized, which is what this process does. And I'm going to talk a little bit more later about the reasons why it makes a good candidate for a vector graphic and the reasons why there might be some problems. Some problems with it. So the first thing is that my workspace here, which is like my tool, here's my toolbar. This is called my options bar up here. It's the same thing in Photoshop, or it's called the same thing in Photoshop. It's all customizable. You can, expand or like collapse these items so that you see them more or less. You can customize virtually any part of this. But for now, anything that you don't know how to use, I recommend you just kind of keep it closed so it doesn't become overwhelming. One thing I'll say is if you don't see these options up here, what you want are tracing options. So you should see something that's talking about tracing. So here where it says image trace and edit original and mask, that's what you want to see. If you don't see that, go to Window, go to Workspace, and choose Tracing, because that's the process that we're doing, and so that's the workspace that I want you to have open. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to select my image. You can see it's selected because it has this blue box around it. And I'm going to choose Image Trace. Now, there's lots of different types of traces. I want to do the simplest kind, which for that, all I have to do is hit this button. It's going to do the default. But let's say I had an image with a bunch of colors and I wanted to, create a graphic that has up to 16 colors, for example, or I want to emphasize the fact that it looks like a sketch, or I want to emphasize the fact that it is a photo. You can choose any one of these different traces just by clicking this down arrow. But for me, for now, I'm just going to hit the one image trace button. It usually takes a while, this process, depending on how complex your image is. And then you can see how it became much more cartoon-like. That's the live tracing method. So basically what it's done is an algorithm has chosen, based on your how dark your lines are, to make them either black or white. And that's it. Like no grayish, no sort of light. Like you can see areas where it might have gotten a little bit lighter. The algorithm has chosen to make them just white. Right? So they've just pretty much disappeared entirely where they were too light. So that's why I always do my original drawings if I'm planning to live trace. I do them with a micron pen and or a Sharpie, and I try to go over them a couple of times so they're nice and dark, because otherwise you get these gaps, and those gaps are problematic, which I'll explain later. So the next step that you're going to do after live tracing is you're going to hit expand. And what that does is it selects every single part of your trace, of your image. And the next step is you can ungroup all of the parts. So it might seem like, well, what's there to ungroup? It's like all one thing, except you have black and white. So I'm going to ungroup those by going to Object, Ungroup. And it doesn't look like anything changed because everything's still selected. But now when I click here, you'll see that the interior parts are not selected. And that's really helpful in case I want to delete what was the white of the paper, so that I could put my image of leaves and branches on any kind of color background. So let's see what happens when I do that. So I deleted the quote-unquote white background, and I'm going to put a different color. Bear with me for a second. Whoops. Ugh, I think the grayscale is enabled, so I could fix it, but I might be too lazy. Let's just leave it gray for now. It doesn't really matter. But the point is, I have to send this behind my actual image, so I right-click here, 2 fingers on your trackpad. I go to Arrange, and then I say Send to Back. So now with this gray in the background, we can actually see the parts that I deleted, which were the white parts, and we can also see the parts that I haven't deleted. So I can go through and keep deleting these parts that are supposed to be the background. But you've probably picked up on the fact that there's a problem. And the problem is that part of the inside of this leaf got deleted. I'm going to zoom in. The reason is because this gap here. So when I clicked out here, it was like, okay, I'm going to delete all the white parts that are connected, which is like all this outside part. But because when I live traced, there was a lighter area here that the algorithm interpreted as white, it made this little, like almost like a river overflowing, it made this little way in so that this interior part of the leaf got deleted, and that kind of ruins it, because if I want to put this on a blank background, I don't want this part of the leaf to appear to be the color of the background. It should be the color of the leaf, and I can actually change the color of the leaf to any color that I want. Again, this is such a grayscale, I could fix it, but laziness. So you can see how I can actually manipulate the inside of the leaf here, whereas this has just straight up been deleted. I deleted it. Right? That's why we can see through it to this gray layer in the background. So it's really important when you're doing your illustration that you try to use a nice, thick, dark line, and that anything you want to be enclosed is really enclosed, that there's nothing kind of like brushy about it. I'll open the original so we can try and see where that weak point is. Oh, actually, it's just straight up not there in my original. There's just a gap. So that's why that happened, because there was a gap there in my drawing. So you just want to make sure that everything is connected so that you avoid this problem, because it really does kind of ruin everything. And then you can see here where I still probably want to go back and continue to delete some of these white areas. And then when I delete them, I can see the gray behind them. Some of them, though, I might want to keep the white there because it kind of adds that nice little detail to some of these little seed pods. If I wanted to, if there were any little floaty parts, like let's say that I wanted to have this part of the leaf be connected to this part of the leaf for some reason. If I hold my shift key down and then I click here, now these are both selected, and then if I go to Object and Group, now if I move them, they move together. So let's say if I were to recolor all of this part of the leaf and I wanted to move it out of the way for some reason, then I could just group only the parts that I wanted in order to manipulate them separately from the rest of the image. So even though you ungrouped everything at the beginning, you can selectively regroup. And then if you change your mind, you can ungroup it again. And now they're separate again. So now when I move one, I don't move both of them. And then the last thing is, once you're happy with your illustration, I'm going to delete this gray background. Once you're happy with your illustration, you're going to want to save it as a PNG. I can't remember if it's export or save as in here. Let's try save as. Nope. File, export, export as. And then a PNG is a type of file that allows you to have no background, a transparent background. And it will be displayed on a checkerboard like this because the checkerboard is a way to visually represent transparency, because obviously actual transparency is not possible on your computer screen. So the checkerboard is like code for being like, there's no background here. I want it to be high quality. I'm going to hit OK. Hopefully it's on my desktop now. Yeah, here it is. So when I open it, I can see, like, this is just, the background of this, this document. But now let's say that I wanted to use this image in a brochure, or you guys haven't used InDesign either necessarily, but let's say that you wanted to put this on a birthday invitation or something that is real. So let's say you're doing, I don't know, black is probably not a color you'd use for a birthday illustration or invitation, but maybe it is. So I can go ahead and drop that illustration in here, that PNG, theoretically. Let's try that a different way. Well, no, I should be able to just drop it in. There we go. Just dropped it in the wrong spot. Oh my god, keep doing that. So there's all kinds of fun stuff you can do in here with this as a graphic element. Obviously, like, it had those problems that I'd want to go back and fix. And you can see here now on the teal background, that white part that was deleted, right? That's always going to be problematic for you. You do just have to go back and fix the drawing and rescan it. So that's one thing about the LiveTrace, is it identifies those weak points, and you do just have to fix them. There isn't really a way around it. Sometimes what I find is helpful is just like using a piece of tracing paper, putting it over your original, especially if there's lots of like sketchy pencil marks. Put it over your original, trace it with a micron or a Sharpie, and then rescan the new version, just because it's just going to be better. So this graphic, is a graphic that we can use in any number of ways now. And we can, make an invitation here. We could, I don't know what this could be. It could be a brochure about plants. It could be any number of things. But the point is that I have a really flexible graphic that can be used and scaled up without becoming pixelated, which is not, you can't really say that of photographs a lot of the time. So this is a really nice thing, especially if you're considering graphic design or just any kind of digital artwork. This is something you're really going to want to know how to do. In Adobe Illustrator, there's this thing called libraries, and you can actually store your graphics in, whoops, not that part. So I would probably want to group this whole thing again before I did this. So you can drag it in here to graphics in your library. And then the cool thing is, over in InDesign, if I go to my libraries, it should be showing up here. There it is. So now I could just drag it in here from there, and I wouldn't even have to take it from my desktop, because it's all stored in this like library that's shared between all of the Adobe programs, including Photoshop. So it just saves you that time of having to like find stuff on your desktop. And that's a feature that I really like to use with my graphic design stuff, especially. So let me know if you need any help. And just a reminder that if you go to the Adobe website, just like adobe.com, you can always look up tutorials about these programs if you're like really stuck. There's lots of stuff on YouTube as well, but the quality varies, and also sometimes they're talking about older versions of the program and you don't realize it until later. And then you're like, oh, none of that stuff is real because that program they were talking about was the 2012 version. So I don't know why it's taking forever to load, but adobe.com, there, if you click on support, which is usually one of the links up here when it loads properly, you can just search Adobe Illustrator or LiveTrace, and there will be additional demos for you to access that might be helpful to you. Yeah, I hope you have enjoyed this demo, and good luck.